Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. With Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon, here's your host, Matt Jones.
We seem to really like to come back in games. And it's not just at Arkansas, it happened in Nevada too. In a game, there's always 3 runs. So that's one of the things we always talk to our team about. Like, we might be down by a large margin, and we might talk about, hey, they've controlled 2 of these 3 scoring runs, but there's 1 more left in this game. You know, can we be the team that goes on a 15-1 scoring run? And I don't know, Bob, you're sitting here, I don't know what the scoring run was the other day. 23-4. I know it was a Division II team, but still, we hadn't done that all game, and then we kind of figured out a way.
That was Arkansas coach Eric Musselman at the Hogs Illustrated Sports Club on Wednesday, talking about his team's penchant for comebacks. That was the story of the Razorbacks in the 2020-21 season, and of course, they started out that way with their exhibition game the other night against East Central Oklahoma, coming back from a 14-point deficit in the second half with about 11 minutes to play, and they win that game 77-74. Up next for the Razorbacks is an exhibition on Saturday against what should be a much better opponent than what they saw last weekend. North Texas is going to come to Bud Walton Arena. Tip-off for that game is at 4 o'clock. North Texas was an NCAA tournament team a year ago. Matt Jones, joined today by Scotty Bordelon of WholeHogSports.com and Andrew Joseph of WholeHogSports.com and Dudley Dawson of Hogs Illustrated. First time we're going to try a true roundtable format on our podcast. Full disclosure, Scotty and I were not at the exhibition last week, so like many of you, we didn't see it. We didn't get eyes on what actually happened inside Bud Walton Arena. Dudley and Andrew were both there. Dudley, let's start with you. What were your thoughts as you were watching the team play last weekend? What did they do that got them behind to a Division II team, and then what did they do over those last 11 minutes or so that allowed them to come back?
Well, I think I encapsulated it in a tweet that I sent out with a little over 11 minutes left that said the Razorbacks have been bad in every facet of the game today. And pretty soon after that point, they started playing better defense, got, I think, 2 turnovers in a row that led to baskets, started getting some easy points, and it was a bad shooting day for them. They had to find a way to get some easy points. They did that with their defense with about 11 minutes to go. They played with a sense of urgency, and I thought East Central University out of Ada, Oklahoma, realized that, hey, we're not really supposed to be playing with these guys, and now we're going to play not to lose instead of to win.
Andrew, it was a poor shooting day, like Dudley said. I think they were 2 of 16 from 3, shot a little bit better inside the arc, didn't shoot free throws real well, and I don't think it really matters what opponent you're playing. You're going to struggle if you can't shoot the ball.
Yeah, I think the shooting was probably the most shocking thing from the scrimmage when you consider that they have all these score-first guys that, you know, led their teams before transferring and scoring. And they have guys like Devo Davis, who his big offseason focus was working on a 3-point shot. He didn't make one in the scrimmage. They only made 2 as a team, which was just kind of, I guess, shocking. And Musselman said that in his post-game press conference, that he had never seen this team shoot this bad. And they were so good in the shoot-around that he canceled the last 15 minutes. And so I think, you know, it's just maybe it was one of those days, and it wasn't a lack of energy. I think it was a lack of execution. And sometimes that just happens in basketball where things aren't going your way and it starts to dogpile on you a bit. And I think that happened to them, and the offense was brutal. And I think the like Dudley said, the defense in the last 10 minutes where they started forcing turnovers and getting easy buckets in transition, I think that really jump-started the offense and led that comeback.
Scotty, Max Pendry is the head coach at East Central, used to be a graduate assistant here for Eric. How much do you think familiarity had to play into what we saw in that first weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably certainly make that point. I don't think it really had a whole lot to do with it. I just think it was a bad day for Arkansas. And, you know, in terms, you know, you look at the box score, obviously wasn't there. I was spending the day with my wife on her birthday, which was much more important in the grand scheme than an exhibition. But I think, like you've seen in the past, especially last year, Arkansas at times offensively turned much more 2-point centric than, you know, perimeter oriented. And I think that was, you know, the thing there. on last weekend, I would imagine Eric Musselman told his team, we don't need to be so perimeter focused in this game. Like this should be a game where we can, get a lot of the shots that we want and a lot of the shots that, you prefer in a game like that when you feel like you can get those shots or closer looks. And so there wasn't, maybe a big emphasis on perimeter shooting. I know there was a lot of focus on the free throw shooting too, but my thing was, just watching the highlights, the few that there were, and going over the box score was I kind of expected Arkansas to be, a little bit more opportunistic defensively and get points, turn your defense into offense. And it doesn't seem like Arkansas really did that until, it was kind of crunch time when they had to turn things around, or, you could become an early storyline in college basketball for the wrong reasons.
I also think there's something to be said for them walking in the gym, some of them after the Elite Eight appearance last year, and the others who had success on their other teams before they transferred here, that they just thought they would roll them, just thought they could show up and play really like they did in the red-white scrimmage, a week before. And they did not have the intensity. They were not ready to play mentally, I don't think. At East Central University was. And I think that factored into it as well. And then it started rolling downhill for them when they started missing shot after shot after shot.
I know, Andrew, you texted me during the game about Chris Likes, and you mentioned that, he might end up being, maybe your favorite player on this team to watch. He's already had like a pretty interesting time at Arkansas. Like he's had his ups and downs. Eric Musselman has kind of called him out a couple of times. Like, you've got to figure out this offense, like learn it, just have a greater understanding of the ins and outs of the offense. But he had a pretty big day the other day. What were you guys' impression of him?
Yeah, I think he immediately caught my eye with just how quick he got up and down the court. And I think it was on offense and defense. I will say he picked up a lot of tic-tacky fouls on defense, trying to reach in and go for steals. But I think that's something that he kind of has to do to make up for his lack of size on defense, is try to pick up those loose balls. But I think on offense, he's a guy that can be able to carry a team when they're not scoring like they were on the scrimmage. I think him and JD Note are probably going to be two keys to that offense to pick him up on when they're having bad shooting nights like they were. And I think probably you're going to see that lineup with Davis, Likes, and Note when they go small. I know Musselman talked about in the post-game press conference that they're probably going to go small a lot this year based on what he had seen. And I think that was the lineup that brought them back into the game and eventually closed out the game and got the win. So I think it was surprising not seeing Stanley Amude out there. I think he only played 6 minutes in the second half for a guy that scored over 20 points on his last team. But I think that three guard lineup with DC Tony and Jalen Williams is probably the one you're going to see the most.
And I would say there's two things I noticed right off the bat. Number one was how incredibly small he is. I mean, when we went to the practice that they had let us in, you didn't notice it as much, but I thought, man, this is not going to be able to work with this guy defensively, because they were taking advantage of him in the first half and taking him down in the post, doing different things. And the other thing was, like Andrew said, he's very quick, obviously, but he played a much better second half. He proved to be a ball handler down the stretch, as Coach Musselman has said a couple of times now. He's searching for a point guard who can distribute the ball to the other players, get them in positions to score, and that's a big thing. Chris Likes and JD Note are more score first point guards, but somebody, and you can see how frustrated he was after the ball game with just I think 9 assists and 10 turnovers, that somebody's going to have to get to where they do the extra pass. And that was another thing in the first half I noticed, was that everybody just came out. It was like, I was thinking, I've got two 30-year-olds now, and I was thinking that back when they were little, that we'd take them to the park and we'd let them out and they'd just go willy-nilly and run all over the place. That's what it looked like at the first of the game. That, and this whole thing about them being out of shape, I think was overblown. I think it was just one of those things that they were so excited to play that they gassed themselves out in the first 6 minutes. He was using it as coach speak. He was making a point, and I'm sure, they had the weighted vest on this week in practice, which was something he brought out in the middle of the season last year. But I think that it was just a matter of them being so excited to get to the park that they just went around and ran all over the place, and we're not focusing on what you do discipline wise and what you need to do to become a team. And you have to, even if you have 50 million scores, you've got to learn to set up your teammate if he has a better shot.
We'll talk more about conditioning here in just a minute, because Eric Musselman had some comments about that whenever he was speaking at our luncheon this week. Also want to tell you that we'll have Grant McCasland, the North Texas head coach, on our podcast a little bit later. We'll talk to him about this weekend's exhibition. Musselman joked, by the way, Dudley, yesterday that he hasn't gotten any new clothes this year because he thinks Chris Likes is getting all the clothes that he got last season because they're similar in stature. That kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about in terms of Chris Likes and how big he is, or maybe the lack thereof. I think it's important for people to keep in mind something, and that is that Arkansas was not playing East Central the other day anywhere near full strength. Trey Wade didn't play. Obviously, Kamani Johnson was out. Neither of them are expected to play again this weekend when they play North Texas. And then on top of that, you've got Connor Vanover dealing with an injury. You've got Jalen Williams dealing with an injury. I know they like to talk about positionless basketball, but there's nobody out there that you would consider like a power forward or maybe even a center that was able to defend the lane, get the rebounds, give them a presence on the post. And then Eric Musselman said when they were in there, he did not like how his post players were playing the East Central pick and roll.
Yeah, I think Jalen Williams is a guy that certainly he fits in that, power forward category. He can play a small ball five for you. Absolutely. I mean, he would play that for me any day of the week, but he's not, completely healthy yet. He's still dealing with that ankle injury that he re-aggravated several weeks ago. But you're like you mentioned earlier, you're missing Trey Wade and Kamani Johnson. Those two guys will bring a sense of physicality and toughness to the floor. And they'll go and rebound the hell out of the ball too. And that's two things that you're missing with those two guys. And I believe, if I'm right, Eric mentioned that, he was a little bit concerned about the lack of shot blocking on this team. Well, Jalen Williams is more than capable of doing that. So is Kamani Johnson. Obviously, Connor Vanover is too. Connor's dealing with a little bit of a tweaked knee. So, I mean, it seems like a lot of your problems are stemming from just not being healthy. And, you get those guys back healthy. It doesn't automatically mean that they're going to provide those things, but it's a step in the right direction. Maybe gives you a little bit of optimism that you'll be able to, maybe fill those holes that Eric Musselman says his team has a million of at this point. It's just about getting healthy. It's kind of like with the football team. A lot of your problems are just guys being, maybe a step behind or maybe two steps behind because of time that they've missed.
One thing that I was thinking of is I was keeping track of the game. I wasn't there, but as I was keeping track of the game, I kept coming back to a comment that Norm DeBryan had made several years ago to me, and he was talking about his 1987 baseball team. He said in the fall of '86 they lost to a junior college, and I think he might have said they might have lost pretty badly to a junior college. And he was thinking at that point, boy, I don't know if we're going to be very good this year. But that loss got their attention. They turned, they found some things over the off season and early in the season. And by the end of the year, that's a 51 win team that's in the College World Series. I think about Syracuse losing to, Lemoyne about 10 years ago in the preseason Division II team. That was a Syracuse team that went 30-5. These games are not necessarily an indicator of how good or bad a team is. It could be a matter of having an off day. It could be a lot of things, but I think what we've come to expect from a Musselman coach team is that what you see in October and especially in November when the games start counting is vastly different than what you're going to see, say, come February or March. I can't think of a lot of coaches who really develop their team in the season, or at least that I've noticed, as well as he seems to do.
One thing that I find really interesting about the preseason and when Arkansas announced that it was playing a Division II school, a lot of people are like, why don't you play somebody that's, a little bit better competition? And the common answer to that is so you can work out the kinks. Like this is, you're trying to fit all these pieces together and find some cohesion and maybe get time for guys who may fill roles while other guys are out. But when Arkansas plays these games and you see the kinks, it's like people get upset by it. Like that's exactly what this game is for. And you're talented enough top to bottom to go and win a game like Saturday or last Sunday when, you're not at your best. But that's exactly what these games are for, is just work out the kinks. So you can't I know it wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination, but that's exactly what that game was scheduled for.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think games like these are when you're trying to figure out who plays well with who and what lineup goes best. And I think the theme of Eric Musselman's teams throughout the years have been getting these new transfers and how do they gel and who's going to play and who's not going to play. And it makes me think of these kind of the press conferences that we've had throughout leading up to this point where we ask about the newcomers and how they're mixing with the people that are staying. And every answer is, oh, we're looking really well. Everyone's getting along. They fit in quite nicely. And it just did not look like they were on the same page on the scrimmage yet. And that's not to say that they can't get there, but for all these answers that they're playing really well and they're gelling together, it just wasn't showing on the scrimmage. And I think that's why you played those games. But then you also have in those answers, they're telling you, oh, this guy's going to play a huge role on the team and this guy's going to play a huge role. But the fact of the matter is, everyone can't play. He plays a extremely tight rotation, so there's going to be an odd man out or two, and I don't think we know who that is yet because we haven't seen them at full strength. But I think once we get that game against North Texas, I'm not sure if Kamani or Trey Wade will be back for that, but if they end up playing and we get a clearer picture against maybe a better team and we can see maybe who is leading that charge to be in the rotation and who's not.
Neither of those players are expected back for the North Texas game. In fact, Dudley, Eric said that he might end up playing a 5-guard rotation in the starting lineup against the Mean Green.
Yeah, and it is. I was just going to point out that you did that those two guys won't be back. They are scheduled, he thinks, to be back for the opener, which is 12 days or so after this one. But yeah, I continue to look at he's going to do what is best for his team throughout the game. I love to sit down, and I know a lot of our board members do as well, and try to find, hey, this is going to be the best starting lineup. Well, he's going to work on it throughout the year. It's what he did last year. I mean, they didn't start off great last year. They certainly finished great, but a lot of that was because of the cohesion of the unit that he got out there on the floor that had defined the roles and were able to play as a unit. Again, I go back to being a Coach Sutton disciple, I go back to the always getting a better shot for your teammate. And I think that's going to be one big thing on this team, whether it's 5 guards, in this positionless basketball thing of his. I think the big thing is going to be who plays well together, not necessarily who's the best scorer, who's the best defender, who's the best passer, but who's the best in getting them to where they need to be in terms of compatibility out there on the floor.
And it's not always about who your starting lineup is. Like that's not always the most important thing. It's like, who's your 7th guy? Who's your 8th guy? Who is the prime candidate to replace, Aldisi Tony when he checks out? Who can replace the things that he brings to the floor when he has to sit because he's been going really hard hitting the glass and bringing a lot of toughness to the floor? And it's, you got to remember that roles evolve throughout the season. And so, rotations change throughout the season too. That's why sometimes teams don't really hit their stride until, mid-January or February, like Arkansas's case last year.
Well, I mean, like last year, JD Note, I think you could make a pretty strong argument that he was one of their 5 best players, but he made the team better coming off the bench. That's when the team played best, was whenever he came off the bench. And then, of course, I think he was the 6th man of the year in the SEC. I think there's also something to be said about having older players that you're trying to build a team through. I mean, you think about Chris Likes has come in from Miami and Tony's come from Pittsburgh, and they're coming from all these different places. And so they've developed different tendencies because they've been coached differently. And I think that's a different dynamic on a team like this than to say what Kentucky does most years in assembling all these 5-star freshmen who are younger and maybe not as set in their ways. And so I think that's something that they're having to coach out of them in the preseason, teach them how to play more as a team. I teased this a little bit earlier about Eric Musselman and some of the things that he told us at our Hogs Illustrated Sports Club this week was really fascinating. I'm going to play a clip here to hear him talk about a podcast that he listened to with Chauncey Billups, the Portland Trailblazers coach. Musselman mentioned that he actually coached Billups for a time in the NBA, and it was about putting an address on it. And I'm just going to let Musselman explain that.
What put an address on it means is when you come into a huddle, don't tell your team, hey, we need to defend better. It's, no, Jalen Tate, you need to defend better. And so we now talk about put an address on it, and after the press conference the other day, I did not put an address on it, I generalized. But when we met yesterday, one of the players said, Coach, put an address on it, who's not in shape? So behind closed doors, sometimes you generalize and sometimes you don't. But we do have some guys in phenomenal shape. Digo Davis, JD Note. JD Note's been lifting weights on his own at night when nobody's around. So they have they usually lift like 4 times a week, and he comes back and lifts on his own, which is incredible. That's why he's changed his body. Those 2 guys in particular are in insane positive shape. And then we have a few guys that are gasping for air.
You heard Eric Musselman there talking about don't generalize things. Tell them in practice individually, you're not doing right. You're not in good shape. You're not playing a pick and roll defense. Dudley, this is it's very blunt coaching style, but in listening to his comments, it sounded like it's a style that a lot of his players want to have.
Yeah, and we had both Kamani Johnson and Devo Davis at a players forum that I'm involved with a couple of weeks ago, and they talked a lot about this, about how he seems to be a fun-loving, gregarious guy that, is everybody's friend, but behind closed doors, he will get on your butt, and he will very pointedly point out your mistakes to the point of embarrassing you if need be, if you don't get it right the second or third time after he tells you to do so. There is a big thing about coachability, no matter what sport you're in, certainly in basketball where it's so frenetic and cohesion is such a big thing. You have to manage personalities. That's something that Coach Sutton, Coach Richardson, many other successful coaches have done over the years. You got to know when you can go at them, when you need to be a little softer, when you need to talk to them as a team, and when you need to talk to them as an individual. And I think we saw him do that last year. That's why they came together going down the stretch. And I think that that's going to be one of his things this year as well. It may tire him out by trying to find the right combination and the right way to get to these guys, but I think he'll do it because he's been coaching since he came out of the womb, it seems like. So, I think he'll be able to do it.
I have a funny story that kind of speaks volumes about the intensity that Musk coaches with and that they practice with. I ran into Chris Likes over the summer at the Imes Dog Park in Fayetteville, and he starts telling me all about how this new practice style and the intensity that they play with is just completely foreign to him. And, I'm thinking like he's coming from a Power 5 school in one of the top division or conferences in the ACC. And so it's not something that you would expect him to be completely shocked by, but then he's going on and on about how he's getting worn out. He can barely move the next day. And he's some of the things he's really slow picking up on. And he was like, this team they practice way harder than any team I've ever been on. And I thought that was something interesting to note from a guy coming from another Power 5 school.
Of course, he played for a pretty hard-nosed coach in Jim Larinaga at Miami. Up next, North Texas coach Grant McCaslin is going to talk to us about this weekend's exhibition game. This is the basketball podcast of Mid-America, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit them at their location in Rogers, 411 South Metro Parkway, or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
Arkansas will play North Texas on Saturday, 4 o'clock tip-off at Bud Walton Arena. No TV, just radio for the game. The Razorbacks and the Mean Green both were in the NCAA tournament a year ago. Both teams won games in the NCAA tournament last season. North Texas, coming off a championship season in Conference USA, also beat Purdue in the first round of the tournament. And their head coach, Grant McCaslin, joins us now. Coach, we appreciate you taking some time to talk about this weekend's game.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me on.
So I was reading about your team. I see you've lost some of your leading scorers from a year ago. You do have a double-digit scorer back. Just tell us some about your team. What are you hoping to learn about them this weekend in Fayetteville?
Well, I know we're going to play a program and a team that competes extremely hard and is aggressive on both ends of the floor. And, you know, we played there the last couple of years, and Coach Musselman and the Razorbacks have bamboozled us both times. I mean, I don't even think the score is indicative of how bad it got. Two of the worst losses that we've had ever. And it's attributed to just how well they get after it and share the ball and play the game on both ends. I mean, just, you know, we're looking to see our weaknesses quickly and figure out how we can improve. That's the name of the game this time of year.
You've got Tyler Perry, and I wanted to ask you about him because I know a lot of the people who listen to us know who he is. He grew up in Springdale. Now, he graduated high school in Spiro, Oklahoma, just across the Arkansas line down near Fort Smith. But when this game was announced a week or so ago, he tweeted, he said that Bud Walton Arena was my Madison Square Garden growing up. What have you seen from him since he's come into your program from Coffeyville Community College? And, you know, just kind of what does he mean to your program right now?
Oh, Tyler's a fantastic basketball player, but he's an awesome guy. I mean, he's a great leader. He comes from a great family. You know, he's grown up with that underdog mentality because of his size. I mean, he's not much taller than I am, and maybe shorter than I am. Let's be honest. But he's competitively sharp and understands the game, and a blast to coach because he wants to win, but he also now knows how to bring his teammates with him. Some people can, you know, competitively bully their teammates. He just has a good way about him. And, you know, he did say the same thing to me. He just grew up, you know, wanting to play there at Bud Walton, and to be able to have that opportunity. Obviously, we're thankful to the staff there at Arkansas and Coach Muss for letting us come down and play. And, you know, I know it means a lot to he and his family also, which this is what it's about, you know, these experiences for these young guys to be able to play the game, and they love play and play in places that they dreamed about playing in.
I wonder, how do you prepare for Arkansas? Because it's a different team than what you've seen the last couple of years ago, or the last couple of years, like you mentioned. Do you go back? Do you watch the red-white game that was online a couple of weeks ago? How do you prepare for a team that you really don't know a whole lot about with as many new players as they have?
Well, you know, that's kind of the ironic part for both of us. I think both staffs don't know a lot about their teams, and we're trying to figure ours out, you know. And you talk about the talent level. I think we both have talent. It's unmistaken, their talent level. But it's just a matter of how do you put it all together. That's the hard part, right? I mean, how do you put it together, and how do you help your team get better? And that's what we're both trying to get out of this. We're both not looking to, you know, we're not going to win the national championship on Saturday. So, you know, both of us, I think we're trying to figure out our teams, and they're obviously close to doing that, closer than we are, having had, you know, a game already under the lights.
Eric Musselman was talking to us earlier this week. He acknowledged that they probably should have beaten the team that they played last week, Division II East Central, by more than 3 points, or at least people would expect them to win that game by more than 3. You see some weird things happen in these preseason exhibitions. I wonder, you know, as a coach, how unpredictable can these types of games be?
Yeah, you know, I think the pace of these games early, especially for guys that don't have a lot of experience with the ball in their hands a lot, can really get cranked up. And I liked what he also said about, just practices that we've had. We've had so many more than we've had the last couple of years or last year because of COVID. Just having the opportunity to get back out there and scrimmage often is really beneficial. So I don't care who you're playing. I was a Division II head coach, and some of the best teams I coached were in Division II. I mean, we were 31-3 one year and went to the Elite Eight, and that team had a 3-year starter from TCU and a guy that I thought would have been the best player on our team at Midland, and at Midland Junior College, and we got recruited by everybody, Kentucky and everybody. So, basketball is basketball, especially early in the season, and I saw East Central returned a lot of guys. And so, the pace of the game definitely gets going quick when those lights come on, and you want to see some composure. And East Central was obviously composed coming into that game, handling all the pressure. And I'm guessing it helped that the head coach was on staff with Muss and knew what was coming. But, a lot of advantages to being under the lights and getting the speed and pace of the game against somebody else that I think proves that you don't know everything about your team, but it's a step in the process.
You don't see a lot of instances where you have Division I teams scrimmaging, playing exhibition games, whatever you want to call it, against each other in the preseason. And the way you're able to do this is because there's a charitable component. Some of the proceeds are going to the United Way. How did this game come about? What are your thoughts about, facing another team that, you could potentially see in the NCAA tournament in 5 or 6 months?
Well, first of all, I know everybody's trying to figure out how to get games, right? And they had publicized that they were looking for an opponent, and we reached out. And then when it kind of started moving into the let's do something to help other people and do it for a good cause, and obviously that part of it is something that interests everybody. And so, a couple of weeks ago, it got mentioned that it was a possibility, and it finalized actually really quickly. But no, I mean, to be able to go on the road and to play for us specifically, our other scrimmage was by one of those secret scrimmages against Oral Roberts. So it was good to be able to play in something like that, and then to be able to, play under the lights for a good cause. And, it developed pretty quickly. I'm sure they talked to a lot of people about it. We just so happened to have the date that fit them. When you play against great teams, and we have a lot of respect for them, and I know, we will try to play defensively. So I think it's a good test just for them to be able to play against a team that will get after it and try hard. Don't know if we can score against them, but we sure will give a good effort defensively.
So you said you played in a secret scrimmage against ORU already this year?
We did.
Okay.
Well, we did.
I know you can't disclose any secrets, but I wonder generally, how did you feel about what you saw from your team the first time you were able to see them against someone else?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we all played, Arkansas played Oral Roberts there at the end of the year and into their season, and we were all out there at the NCAA tournament together. And Paul Mills, the head coach there, is a friend of mine from Baylor. And so we ended up playing a really close scrimmage against them. I mean, the game was just a 1-possession game at the end. And so, we used that film not knowing for sure we were playing Arkansas, just as a preparation. And then having played them, saw it up close and how good Max is for them. It was good to play somebody else, and it'll be a good barometer for our guys showing them film in preparation to play in Arkansas, just that game and what they were able to do to speed Oral Roberts up, because we tried to do the same thing. So we're similar in a lot of ways in what we try to do defensively. And, that part of it, I think, will resonate with our guys because we have a tremendous amount of respect. And, I know our guys will look forward to the challenge of at least getting out there and playing hard.
Musselman said the other day he's been part of some staffs or part of some teams that have done secret scrimmages. He said he's not a fan of them, that he likes to be able to have his players, he wants to see how they perform in front of people. He thinks that's a way you get your team better. I wonder, what are your thoughts about the dynamics between the secret scrimmages versus what you're going to see this weekend?
Well, I mean, I think he experienced it. What makes it difficult, and he plays against the team in East Central, it's got great players. And, you get to play under the lights. But there's something I think about doing both. That's why I think it would be beneficial for us to move to 3 of these, where maybe you could get at least 1 under the lights and then 2, just because you can control some variables and get guys minutes. Part of it that you want to have is an opportunity for development. And sometimes when you get under the lights and people are playing in front of their family members and they only get 2 minutes because you're only playing 40, makes it difficult. Where, you get in a secret scrimmage and you can play 60 minutes if you want to of game clock, and everybody can play 20 minutes at least. So then you get a better barometer of just kind of different lineups that you may want to see. And so I think there's advantages to both, but I am thankful that we get this opportunity, because if not, we would just be tipping off November 9th for the first time in game uniforms, which we'll probably be there in practice uniforms because we haven't even got our uniforms from Nike yet. So who knows what we'll wear. We may be looking like we just got out of a scrimmage at 9 a.m. from practice, the way things are going, getting gear in time. But yeah, no, I think both of them are beneficial, and I'm thankful we get to do both, to have a scrimmage and also have this exhibition.
Let me get you out of there here on this, Coach. Eric Musselman, he spoke to us this week, and he was talking about the strategy that goes behind scheduling teams, scheduling games, and not just the preseason, but obviously in the non-conference before you get to your conference opponents. And he said, one of the things that they like to do is, maybe they want to schedule a team that's a real good zone defense team that's going to prepare them for an SEC team who plays zone well, or maybe it's a team that's a really good rebounding team. Things to basically learn things about your team that you can get fixed before you play in the games. Not to say that your non-conference games don't matter, but the games that really matter in your conference. 2 questions here. What do you think Arkansas does well that's going to help your team down the line? And what do you think maybe that your team does pretty well that you might be able to challenge Arkansas in some ways this weekend?
Well, Arkansas does a lot of things well. That's why they win so many games, and Muss knows what he's doing in games, of how to take your best players out of the game plan. And so, I think their aggressiveness on both ends of the floor really can get you on your heels, and that environment there. I just think it's really tough to compete, and it's almost like, the waves keep crashing on you and the tide comes in so quick that you can't recover. And that's kind of what it feels like playing them on both ends, where they push it at you in transition, or where they're trapping you, or, they're aggressive and getting after you and guarding the ball. So I think it's just the totality of their pressure offensively and defensively that really will help us. And then hopefully, we kind of play a defense that's similar to what Baylor they faced in the national championship. In that Elite 8 game last year. And, we do side defense some, and we will try to get after it. So maybe give them a little bit different look there. And then we're going to play some different lineups in motion. Hopefully we're better than we were last year offensively when we came and played. But, probably more than anything, it's just a little bit of that side defense. Hopefully that helps them to some extent learn what it takes to play against them.
Coach McCaslin, we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you this weekend.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Our thanks to Grant McCaslin for joining us. When we come back, Dudley, Andrew, and Scotty will join me for more discussion on this weekend's exhibition game. Plus, we'll talk about Gary Blair's retirement at Texas A&M and his legacy with the Razorbacks. This is the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America, presented by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Earlier this week, the SEC coaches released their all SEC preseason teams. Now, the media released its preseason team a week and a half ago. And on that team, you had Devontae Davis, second team preseason all SEC. On the coaches team, Davis was second team all SEC, but it really was striking to see JD Notae as first team preseason all SEC. And Scotty, you and I had this discussion this week. You think there's a disconnect maybe between what reporters see of JD Notae and what the coaches see in terms of his value?
There is absolutely no doubt about it. And all you have to do is sit on press row at an Arkansas home game, and JD will chunk up a shot from 25 to 28 feet out, and he'll miss. And you'll see heads turning like, why is he taking that shot? Like, well, if you look at the numbers, JD is a better 3-point shooter 3+ feet beyond the 3-point line than he is, within 3 feet of the line. He shot 42% on threes 3 feet beyond the 3-point line last year. So that's a better shot for him than it is, if he's closer to the 3-point line. And I just think that, there are some writers in the league who may be a little bit more veteran than I am, who, are maybe accustomed to or not accustomed to guys like JD Notae who are gunners, and maybe long for the day where every player on the team gets, an equal number of looks and that kind of thing. But JD is a gunner, and he's best when he's, in control, got the ball, and can make things happen for himself. And I mean, he's an explosive scorer. He's one of the best scorers in the league, hands down. I mean, you're not going to find 5 other guys who can fill it up better than him. And so I think there's a disconnect with the writers, but what coaches see is a guy who can, he probably strikes fear in a lot of those coaches because they understand the numbers and the value of a guy who can, go get you 8, 10, 12 points quick, fast, and in a hurry, and really flip a game on its head.
And I would also, and come at me, bro, if you want, but I will also tell you that I don't think the SEC basketball media pays enough attention to portal transfers, to different things in terms of looking back on last year. Many of them have sports that dominate their thinking, and I don't think they do enough work early in the season and looking back on the last season to have an informed opinion about that. I'll just throw that out there. That is the only way that I see that JD Notae doesn't rank somewhere on your teams. In that, I thought that was a egregious oversight. And I think that it's one of those things that the coaches usually get it right. Now, yes, the coaches dictate these things to their sports information department and all that most of the time, but they do pay a lot of attention. They do watch a lot of film. They do know what helps a team. And yes, I'm a writer, but I will always, or most always, refer to coaches in terms of what makes a better basketball player, what makes a better basketball team than what my eyes will tell me.
Now let's give credit where it's due. There are some really good basketball reporters, I think, in the SEC. I think Bob Holt's very good, Jerry Tipton, Dave Matter at Missouri. I do think, though, you are onto something. There are probably some who don't pay as much of attention, Scotty.
And I think, too, that part of it is just that writers watch JD play, and his game is just not all the time, aesthetically pleasing. Like, he makes some pretty boneheaded decisions sometimes like that. I'm not disagreeing whatsoever that his shot selection and his decision making is it's not always up to snuff. Like it just isn't. And Eric Musselman will tell you that in a heartbeat too. But these coaches across the league understand the value of a JD Notae type guy. Every coach in the league would want JD on their team. And that's exactly why they put him on the first team. And so his value is, really through the roof. And I think JD, if I can make a prediction right now, I think he probably leads Arkansas in scoring this year. And he's a little bit more efficient than he has been in the past, just because he's really had a huge offseason.
I think he'll definitely lead the team in shots, so he'll have a chance to lead the team in scoring. We mentioned North Texas on Saturday, 4:00 tip-off at Bud Walton Arena. Programming note, that game is not going to be on TV. There's not going to be any type of online stream. So once again, if you want to have eyes in the arena, you've got to be there. Tickets are sold out, but I think there are several available on secondary markets, message boards, and that nature. There will be radio. It's going to be broadcast on 2 affiliates, at least, of the Razorback Sports Network. That's going to be 103.7 The Buzz in Little Rock, also 95.3, which is the ESPN radio affiliate in Fort Smith in the River Valley. It'll be on the Razorback Game Day app, and then it'll be behind a paywall. If you've got a subscription to TuneIn, you can catch the RSN broadcast there. Real quick, guys. What are you wanting to see this weekend from Arkansas? What are you looking for in this exhibition game? We'll start with you, Andrew.
I think the first 10 minutes are going to be the most crucial part of the game. I think they need to come out and put that last game behind them and show that they're better than they were capable of playing last game. But I think probably just to have a good start is the most important thing for them, just knowing that they can put that in the past and show that like they are able to play up to their expectations. They're ranked number 16 in the nation for a reason, and I'd like for them to be able to put that ranking to show why they deserve that.
I'm looking for a bounce back game from Stanley Umude. I mean, it's just super out of character for him to, barely make an impact in a game. That's not who he's been, the last 2.5 or 3 years of his college career. Also looking to see if JD Notae can replicate the game that he had, against East Central, against better competition, against guards who are, more talented, across the board. If he can do so efficiently, in his terms, I guess it's not this, his efficiency is different than other players, I would say. But Umude is a guy I'm looking forward to, and looking to see if Jackson Robinson too can add some pop off the bench.
And I am going to be looking, because he made such a big deal out of it at the post-game press conference after East Central University, how he's going to split up the point guard minutes. I mean, who is going to get volume there? Is he going to try to use all 4 of them in some way, or is he going to try to go with a scoring point guard? I'm just, I think I'm as curious as I think he is to see who's going to run the team. I think Devo is probably a better off guard, but I think that somebody has to be the lead guard, whether it's a point guard or whatever. Somebody's got to be the leader, got to be a guy who controls the pace, who does things. And the guy that wins that job, again, I go back to, is going to be the guy who gets his teammates in the positions to score, because that is one thing during their frenetic opening against East Central University that they were not doing. They were just flinging shots and taking the first shot, not the best shot.
I totally agree with Dudley. I think Devo might be a better 2 guard than a point guard. Not to say that he's not a good lead guard, but his playmaking, I think, at the 2 guard just is so great. And I think you might see all 3 of those guys on the floor at the same time, which will be interesting to see who's initiating offense and who isn't. But I do think you'll at least see either JD or Chris Likes on the floor. I think Eric is going to try to stagger those guys, I don't want to say as much as he can, but those guys both provide explosive offense, I think. And so you want to have at least one of those guys on the floor. And then when you bring one off, you can kind of put in a similar type player in his place.
This is probably low-hanging fruit. I'm interested to watch conditioning. I mean, there was talk about it last week, and not just because of what Musselman said last week, but the fact that he had him practicing in weighted vests and with bricks this week. You wonder how much and obviously being a little bit shorthanded this weekend, you wonder how much that takes a toll in this North Texas game. One more thought on conditioning is that I think a lot of coaches would tell you, doesn't matter what the sport is, early in the season, they don't think their team is conditioned. And that's what these exhibition games are for. It's to build you up into basketball game readiness. That way you're not having this conditioning discussion necessarily on November 9th. Whenever you play Mercer, you're seeing, what things look like once or twice before the regular season starts. Mentioned Devo Davis earlier. He's on the cover of our Hogs Illustrated basketball preview. Hope you'll check that out. You can go to wholehogsports.com, and at the top of the page, there's an HI button. If you click that button, it'll take you to our e-edition, and you can read it there if you're a subscriber. If you've got any questions about subscriptions, call us at 1-800-757-62 9277. Real quick before we get out of here, news out of College Station, Texas this week that Gary Blair is going to retire as the Texas A&M women's coach. Of course, Blair was a great coach at Arkansas, 10 seasons. He's the winningest women's basketball coach in the history of the program. And there are a lot of instances, Dudley, of you scratch your head. How did you let Eddie Sutton get away? How did you let Lou Holtz get away? I don't think there's any bigger one that got away, though, than Gary Blair. And given what he had done for the program, where the program was whenever he left, and then obviously he's just, kind of reinvented himself, I guess, at Texas A&M.
Yeah, John White strikes again in that scenario where you let Blair get away. Should have given him an extended contract. Arkansas floundered there for a while after he left. Great dude, obviously great coach, somebody who was not born in Arkansas but became an Arkansas, and in his love for the state, he's been certainly an influence on Mike Neighbors and many other coaches that have come through this program as assistants and all that. Just again, a dude that gets it in terms of also publicity, doing what you need to do with your team. But the one thing I think, off the court, I always knew about him and would talk to his players about, he cared so much that they became successful in life, whether they did it in the basketball court.
Blair, the fourth winningest active coach in women's basketball. He's got the 12th most wins in women's college basketball history. Of course, was at Stephen F. Austin before he came to Arkansas, and has done just an incredible job at Texas A&M. I think probably what tells you about the job he's done at Texas A&M is that they had 7 consecutive losing seasons before he got there, and they've rarely missed the NCAA tournament since. Of course, won the national championship there in 2011. He's in the Women's College Basketball Hall of Fame. I think there's an argument that could be made for a Naismith Hall of Fame for Gary Blair, but that's an argument we could have at another time. Hope you go to wholehogsports.com this week before, during, and after the exhibition game against North Texas. We're going to have plenty of coverage from this game. We're going to have several reporters at that game, and we'll have a lot from the Razorbacks game against the Mean Green. We'll be back with another podcast next week talking about the North Texas game, looking ahead to the Mercer game. For Dudley Dawson, Andrew Joseph, and Scotty Bordelon, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us.
The proceeding has been a production of wholehogsports.com. Look for our latest podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at wholehogsports.com for the latest news and commentary.